They had already dug the pit. Pastor Joseph stood at the edge, hands tied, clothes torn, yet his voice did not tremble. He was praying. Around him, masked men held torches high. The king of Onitsha village stood before him, his voice echoing through the night. "Bury him!" As the first heap of soil hit Joseph's feet, Rose screamed his name. Their children, Raphael and little Akpamu, were held back by armed guards. But even as the dirt rose to his chest, the pastor whispered, "Father, if this is your will, let your will be done." But this story didn't end in that pit, because 3 days later, something happened in Onitsha that no one could explain. Not the king, not the guards, not even the men who buried him with their own hands. To understand what really happened that night, we have to go back to the day Pastor Joseph received a transfer letter to a remote part of Onitsha, a place no preacher had survived in for more than 2 weeks. Rose begged him to reconsider. Their son Raphael was still in school. Their daughter Akpamu was barely 8. But Joseph only said one thing: "If God sends me, then I must go." And so, with nothing but their faith, the family began the 10-hour journey to Onitsha, a village drowned in silence, ruled by fear, and haunted by something far darker than they could ever imagine. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming stories of faith, hope, and true miracles. The morning sun crept slowly through the curtains, drawing faint golden lines across the sitting room wall. Pastor Joseph sat at the edge of the couch, a single sheet of paper trembling slightly in his hand. The letter bore the official seal of the church headquarters, an instruction he had prayed would never come so soon. It was a transfer notice. He was being moved from their growing ministry in Wari to a small, struggling branch in Onitsha. For a long moment, he said nothing. His wife, Rose, moved around the kitchen, humming softly as she packed the children's lunchboxes. It was an ordinary morning, peaceful, simple, until he called her name. His voice carried a quiet weight that froze her steps. She turned, wiping her hands on a towel, her eyes meeting his, searching, cautious. When he handed her the letter, the air in the room shifted. The sound of the clock ticking became louder, heavier. She read the words twice, her lips parting slightly as disbelief settled in. Onitsha, a faraway town, crowded, unpredictable, known for its markets and noise, not for safety or quiet living. For a while, she didn't speak. The children were still upstairs, unaware that their world was about to change. Then, slowly, she placed the letter on the table and sat beside him. Her expression carried both confusion and quiet protest. She wanted to believe that obedience to God was enough reason, but her heart wrestled with fear. The children's school, their friends, the life they had built, everything would have to be left behind. Joseph's voice was steady when he finally spoke. His faith had always been his compass. "If this is where God sends us, then it is where we must go," he said softly. Rose looked away, her eyes glistening in the morning light. It wasn't defiance that made her hesitate. It was love. Love for her children, love for the life they had built together, love for the peace she feared they might lose. Yet beneath her silence, she knew her husband's calling had never been easy. That evening, as the sun sank behind the clouds, the family sat together for prayer. The atmosphere was heavy, not with doubt, but with surrender. 5 days later, bags were packed, clothes folded neatly into old suitcases, and the small family prepared for the journey. The road to Onitsha was long and uneven. The windows of the bus rattled as it rolled past empty fields and fading billboards. Rose held Akpamu close while Raphael stared out the window, silent, lost in thought. Pastor Joseph kept his eyes on the road ahead, his lips moving in quiet prayer. When they finally arrived, the sky had turned a deep gray. The town buzzed with the noise of traders and distant horns. Their new house stood near the edge of a quiet street, small, worn, and surrounded by thick bushes that swayed in the evening wind. As they stepped out, Rose took a slow breath. Everything around her felt strange, uneasy, alive in ways she couldn't explain. Somewhere deep within, a feeling stirred, that Onitsha would test their faith in ways neither of them could imagine. And though Joseph didn't know it yet, the road he had taken in obedience would soon lead his family into a mystery that faith alone might not be able to explain. The first night in Onitsha was restless. The air was thick, humid, carrying a strange scent of smoke and river water. Crickets sang in uneven rhythms, and from somewhere in the distance, drums echoed faintly, slow, heavy beats that seemed to come from the earth itself. By morning, the family woke to a new reality. Their house, a small bungalow with cracked walls and faded paint, sat at the far end of a dirt road that led into the deeper parts of the community. Rose stood by the window, watching a group of children run past. They were barefoot, their laughter echoing faintly, but their eyes followed her with quiet curiosity. Pastor Joseph stepped outside, adjusting his collar, determined to begin his mission. The church he had been assigned to was less than a 10-minute walk away, but when he reached the small clearing where it was supposed to stand, his steps slowed. The building was no church. It was an abandoned structure. Walls broken, roof caved in, weeds growing through the cracks in the floor. The wooden cross that once stood tall above the door was lying face down in the dust. For a long while he stood there, his heart sinking. Rose and the children joined him soon after. Raphael looked around, confused. "Papa, this place," he began softly, "is this really the church?" Joseph nodded slowly, his throat dry. "It is," he said. "Or at least, it will be again." But before he could say more, something caught their attention. A black statue standing a few feet away near a tree. It was carved roughly in the shape of a man, but its face was twisted, almost lifelike with deep, hollow eyes. From its mouth and nose, a thick red liquid dripped slowly into a small clay bowl beneath it. Rose froze. "Joseph," she whispered, clutching Akpamu's hand tightly, "what is that?" Before he could answer, an old man appeared from behind the bushes. His clothes were worn, and his eyes carried the weight of years. He raised his hand, his voice trembling. "You should leave," he said quickly. "You and your family. Don't stay here." Joseph stepped forward. "Why, sir? What's going on here?" He shook his head. "You don't know this land. That thing you see there," he pointed at the statue, "it's our protector. Outsiders who speak against it never last here. The last man that tried, he didn't make it 2 weeks." Rose's heart pounded. Was he also a pastor? The old man nodded, his eyes darkening. "Yes. They warned him. He refused. And then he disappeared." The words hung heavy in the air. The children moved closer to their mother, sensing her fear.
But Pastor Joseph stood tall, his voice firm yet calm. "Sir, we didn't come here to fight anyone. We came to bring light." The man gave him a sorrowful look. "Then may your God protect you, because the gods of this land don't share their ground easily." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees. Rose turned to her husband, her eyes glistening. "Joseph, maybe we should—" But Joseph raised a hand gently, cutting her off. "No, we were sent here for a reason, and until God says otherwise, we'll stay." As the sun dipped lower, the family knelt in the ruined church and began to pray. Around them, the wind whispered through the broken walls, and somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes watched. Something in Onitsha had just been disturbed. The days that followed their arrival in Onitsha were quiet, too quiet. Pastor Joseph kept busy repairing the broken benches inside the ruined church, clearing weeds around it, humming softly to himself, sweat glistening on his forehead. Rose watched from the doorway, worry etched across her face. "Let's at least find someone to help," she said. "We can't do this alone." But Joseph only smiled faintly. "We won't have to," he replied. "Help will come." He didn't know how true those words would be. That afternoon, as Rose fetched water from the community well, a small voice called out, "Auntie, wait!" She turned to see a girl no older than 8, barefoot, with a faded yellow dress and curious eyes that seemed far too wise for her age. "My name is Muna," she said shyly, holding a bucket nearly as big as herself. "Are you the new people in the house near the old church?" Rose smiled and nodded. "Yes, we are. I'm Rose." Muna hesitated before leaning closer. "Everyone says you shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They say the gods don't like strangers who talk about Jesus." Rose froze for a moment. "And what do you think, Muna?" The girl looked down at the dirt. "I think Jesus is real. My grandmother told me about him before she died, but since we came here, no one talks about him anymore. They say it's dangerous." Rose's heart softened. She knelt to Muna's level, gently touching her shoulder. "It's never dangerous to love God," she said softly, "but sometimes it takes courage." From that moment, Muna became their little guide, showing them the safe paths through the bush, introducing them to the market women, and even helping Joseph clean the church. Her laughter filled the broken building, her tiny hands brushing dust off the old benches. One evening while they worked together, Joseph asked, "Muna, has anyone ever tried to start a church here before?" The girl's expression changed. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Yes, but they said he disappeared. Some say he was taken by the spirits in the ground." Joseph paused. "The spirits in the ground?" She nodded. "The king said he offended the gods. That's why no one comes near this place." There was a silence, heavy and cold. Even the birds outside seemed to stop singing. But then Muna added, "I've been praying someone would come back, someone who isn't afraid." Joseph looked at her, this tiny, brave girl in a place filled with fear, and something within him stirred. "Then maybe God sent us for you," he said quietly. The girl smiled, a small glimmer of light in a dark village. If this story is making sense to you so far, type "I'm still here" in the comments. Let's see who's really following this journey till the end. That night, the sound of distant drums rolled through the wind again, slow, haunting, steady. Rose lay awake, holding Akpamu close, staring at the roof. The noise didn't stop this time. It grew louder, closer, mixed with voices chanting strange words. Joseph sat up, alert. "You hear that?"
Rose nodded slowly, her pulse racing. They couldn't sleep the whole night. That night, strange drums began again in the distance, low, rhythmic, echoing through the trees. Rose couldn't sleep. She turned to Joseph, whispering, "It's like they're warning us." Joseph didn't reply. He sat upright in bed, listening carefully. The sound wasn't just drums this time. There were voices too, chanting words he couldn't understand. That night, long after the mysterious voice had faded into silence, the house refused to rest. The air was still yet heavy, like the walls themselves were listening. Pastor Joseph lay awake, eyes open in the dark, his mind replaying every echo of that strange call. Beside him, Rose shifted uneasily, whispering prayers under her breath. Even Raphael and Akpamu, though asleep, tossed and murmured in their dreams. By midnight, Joseph sat up. The quiet had become unbearable. He tapped Rose gently. "Let's pray," he whispered. They gathered in the small living room, just the two of them, hands clasped, Bible open on the table, a flickering candle casting weak light against the wall. They prayed for protection, for peace, for understanding. But as the night deepened, exhaustion slowly overpowered them. In the middle of the prayers, their voices grew faint, and soon they drifted off, asleep on their knees. When morning came, sunlight poured through the window, soft and warm, as if trying to erase the memory of the night before. Joseph woke first, startled to see the candle was still burning out. He sighed deeply and covered Rose with a wrapper before stepping outside. The air smelled of wet earth. It had rained a little before dawn. That day passed quietly. He spent most of it at the church compound, trying to fix a broken microphone cable, while Rose cleaned the kitchen and fetched water from the nearby borehole. Raphael helped sweep the compound, while Akpamu sat under the mango tree, singing softly to herself. By afternoon, the house looked peaceful again, almost normal. Rose even smiled a little for the first time in days. They ate together, laughed lightly, and for a moment it felt as if everything was returning to how it used to be. But Joseph couldn't shake off the uneasiness. Something in his heart whispered that peace like this never lasts long. As night approached once again, the mood in the house shifted. The sun sank behind the trees, casting long shadows across the compound. The same silence that haunted them before began to creep back in.
Rose tucked Akpamu into bed early, then joined Joseph in the living room for their evening devotion. But as Joseph opened his Bible, a sudden gust of wind slammed the window shut, hard. The candle flickered violently. Rose froze. "Joseph, did you feel that?" He didn't answer, because at that moment they both heard it again. A faint, distant knock coming from outside. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. The knocks came again. 3 slow, deliberate taps echoing through the quiet compound. Joseph and Rose froze where they sat. The candlelight trembled with the rhythm of their heartbeat. For a long moment, no one moved. Rose whispered, "Joseph, please don't open that door." Her voice was small, trembling, almost swallowed by the silence. Joseph hesitated. Every part of him wanted to ignore it, pretend it wasn't real. But something stronger, that strange pastoral instinct, pulled him to his feet. He picked up his flashlight and walked slowly toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice cracking slightly. No answer. He turned the key slowly and opened the door just a few inches, enough to let the beam of the flashlight cut through the darkness. No one. only the empty compound bathed in moonlight. Then a shadow moved. At the far end of the path, near the small gate, stood a tiny figure. It was the little girl, Muna. She looked pale, frightened, her dress dirty and torn. Joseph hurried toward her. "Muna, what are you doing here at this hour?" She shook her head, eyes wide. "They know you prayed last night. The king's guards, they're coming." Rose had followed Joseph outside now, clutching her wrapper. "Coming? For what?" Muna looked at her feet, then back up. "The king said no one should mention the name of Jesus in Onitsha again. He said the ground must drink blood tonight." Rose gasped, taking a step back. "Blood!" Before Joseph could speak, the sound of drums erupted in the distance, deep, rhythmic, growing louder. Torches flickered beyond the trees, voices, chanting, angry, approaching fast. Muna grabbed Joseph's hand, tears streaming down her face. "Please, we must run now." But Joseph didn't move. He looked at Rose, then at the sleeping children inside. "No," he said quietly, "we won't run. We will stand." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "Joseph, please." He turned to her gently. "Rose, remember what we prayed last night. We said, 'Let your will be done.' This might be it." The drums drew closer. Shadows of men appeared behind the trees, holding torches, sticks, and machetes. Joseph took Rose's trembling hands and whispered, "Whatever happens, we will not deny him." Rose nodded through her tears, and they both began to pray, softly at first, then louder, even as the chants outside grew violent. "Muna," Joseph said firmly, "take the children and hide behind the mango tree. No matter what happens, do not come out." The girl obeyed, pulling Raphael and Akpamu away through the back door, disappearing into the dark. The front gate burst open.
Torches filled the yard. Men surrounded the house. And standing in front of them, dressed in dark red, eyes cold and furious, was the king of Onitsha himself. The king stepped forward, his gold staff striking the ground with every measured step. The firelight from the torches made his face glow with rage and authority. Behind him, the villagers stood like soldiers, silent, waiting for his command. Rose clutched Joseph's arm, whispering a prayer under her breath. But Joseph stood still, his heart pounding, his gaze fixed on the king. "Your Majesty," Joseph said in a cold voice, "I warned the last man who came here never to speak that name again. Yet here you are, disturbing our peace." Joseph swallowed hard. "Your Majesty, I came only to bring light, not trouble. I came with the message of love." "Love?" His voice rose. "You call it love when your prayers anger our gods, when your songs insult our ancestors?" The crowd murmured in agreement. One man shouted, "Let him go back where he came from." Another added, "Bury him with his Bible." Rose's knees trembled. She whispered, "Joseph, please." But Joseph stood still, his heart pounding, his gaze fixed on the king. "There is only one true God, the one who made heaven and earth. I cannot stop speaking his name." A gasp spread through the crowd. The king's face twisted in fury. "Bind him!" Two guards rushed forward, seizing Joseph's arms. Rose screamed, trying to pull them away, but one guard shoved her to the ground. The king turned to her. "You have 3 days to leave Onitsha. If you're still here after that, you and your children will share his punishment." He raised his staff and struck Joseph across the face. "Let this be your warning, preacher."
The guards dragged Joseph to the ground, tore his shirt, and flogged him 20 lashes. Each stroke echoed through the night like thunder. But Joseph didn't scream. He prayed. With every lash, his voice grew weaker, but his words grew stronger. "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they do." Even the guards hesitated after the last stroke. The crowd had gone silent. Only the sound of his labored breathing remained. The king lowered his staff slowly. "3 days," he said again. "After that, if I see you preaching, your blood will water this soil." Then he turned, and the crowd followed, their torches vanishing one by one into the night. Rose crawled to Joseph's side, her hands trembling as she lifted his bleeding body. "Joseph, please, you can't do this anymore. We have to leave." He opened his eyes weakly, managed a faint smile. "If we leave now, who will tell them the truth?" Tears filled Rose's eyes as she held him close. The night felt endless. The wind carried the echo of drums fading in the distance, and the smell of blood lingered on the earth. As she bandaged his wounds with torn pieces of cloth, she whispered, "Lord, if this is your will, give us strength to stand." The night dragged on slowly after the king and his men left. Rose barely slept. She sat beside Joseph, dabbing his wounds with a wet cloth, whispering quiet prayers through her tears. Outside, the crickets sang, but even their song carried a strange tension, like the land itself was uneasy. When dawn broke, Joseph was still weak but awake. He tried to sit up. "Joseph," he said softly, "don't let fear win. Fear is the devil's first weapon." She forced a smile, though her hands still trembled. "I'm not afraid," she lied. By morning, the village looked peaceful again. Children fetched water, women pounded yam, and the market came alive. It was as if the night before never happened. But Rose could feel it. Eyes watching from corners, whispers following her every step. When she went to fetch water, 2 women at the stream went silent the moment she arrived. One of them hissed under her breath, "That's the preacher's wife." The other replied, "She should have left already." Rose kept her head down and walked away, fighting back tears. Meanwhile, Joseph insisted on visiting the half-finished church that morning. He leaned on a stick for support, each step heavy, his back bandaged. The villagers stared as he passed, some with pity, others with hate. When he reached the small mud-walled building, he knelt beside the wooden pulpit and whispered, "Even if I must stand here alone, I will still lift up your name." The same day, Muna returned quietly to the house. She brought a small bowl of rice and said, "Mama Rose, take this. My mother cooked too much." Rose smiled faintly and hugged her. "God bless you, my daughter." But as Muna turned to leave, she looked around nervously. "Mama, someone has been watching your house since morning," she whispered. Rose froze. "Watching? Who?" Muna shook her head. "I don't know. I saw him standing behind the old shrine tree, just staring." That evening, Joseph gathered his family again for prayer. The air felt thick, heavy with something unseen. They prayed for strength, for safety, for courage. And just as Joseph finished saying amen, a loud crash came from outside. Rose screamed. Raphael and Akpamu ran to her side. Joseph rushed out and saw the gate wide open. Someone had thrown a burning torch into the compound. The dry grass by the fence had already caught fire. He shouted, "Water! Bring water quickly!" Rose and Muna grabbed buckets, running to the stream behind the house. The fire spread fast.
Neighbors watched from afar, but no one dared come closer. Joseph beat at the flames with his wrapper until his hands blistered, refusing to let the fire reach the small wooden cross by the entrance. At last, after many frantic minutes, the flames died down. The yard was a mess, ashes, smoke, and silence. Rose fell to her knees, crying, "What do they want from us?" Joseph looked around, breathing heavily. Then he noticed something written on the ground near the gate, drawn in ash and red paint. One word: leave. He stared at it for a long time. Then he whispered, "They think fire will chase us away, but the fire that burns within us is stronger." That night, the smell of smoke still hung in the air. The compound was quiet, too quiet, as if even the insects were afraid to sing. Rose couldn't stop pacing. She checked on Raphael and Akpamu every few minutes, making sure their doors were locked, their windows shut tight. Joseph sat by the table, his Bible open, reading by candlelight. "Let's pray again," he said softly, "until dawn if we must." They prayed. They sang softly, but the air inside the house felt heavy, thick, unmoving, suffocating. And then came the whisper. At first it sounded like wind, brushing against the walls. Then clearer, a voice, low, distorted, whispering Raphael's name. Raphael. Rose froze. Her heart pounded as her eyes darted toward the children's room. "Joseph," she whispered, "did you hear that?" He looked up slowly. Before he could answer, a loud bang came from Raphael's door.
"Raphael!" Rose screamed, running toward it, but the handle wouldn't move. Something or someone was holding it shut from the other side. Joseph grabbed his walking stick and forced the door open. The room was empty. The window was wide open, curtains blowing wildly. The boy was gone. Rose screamed his name into the night, running outside barefoot. "Raphael! Raphael!" Joseph limped behind her, shouting too, but the only answer came from the darkness. Then Muna appeared from the shadows, panting. "I saw them! They took him!" she cried. Joseph grabbed her shoulders. "Who took him?" "The masked men," she said through tears. "They came from the king's palace. They covered his mouth and carried him toward the forest." Rose dropped to her knees, shaking uncontrollably. "My son! My only son!" Joseph knelt beside her, tears welling in his eyes. "We'll find him, even if I have to go through fire." Without waiting for dawn, he took a lantern, a stick, and started walking toward the forest. Rose tried to stop him, but he didn't turn back. The night swallowed him whole. Inside the forest, the air was cold. Owls hooted in the distance, and somewhere deeper, faint drumming echoed, slow and rhythmic, like a ritual. Joseph followed the sound until he saw flickering firelight ahead. He crouched low and moved closer. Through the bushes, he saw them. 5 masked men standing around a pit, and in the middle, tied to a tree, was Raphael, his son. Joseph's knees went weak. He wanted to shout, to charge in, but something made him stop. He recognized one of the voices. It was the king's guard captain, the same man who had flogged him days before. "Tomorrow," the guard said, "the king will bury him beside his father. That will end this foolish gospel once and for all." Joseph's eyes widened.
beside his father. That could only mean one thing. They were coming for him next. He backed away quietly, his heart racing, and turned toward the path home. But halfway through the forest trail, something rustled behind him. He turned, and there, standing under the moonlight, was a shadow with glowing red eyes. It wasn't one of the guards. It wasn't human. It stepped closer, whispering his name in a voice that sounded like the wind and the grave combined. "Your time is over." The lantern in his hand flickered, then went out, and the forest went silent. Dawn came slowly, gray and heavy. The roosters crowed, but their calls sounded distant, almost mournful. Rose woke up on the cold floor, the candle long melted to wax. She looked around, no Joseph. His walking stick was gone, his Bible still open on the table. A sudden chill ran through her. She rushed outside. "Muna, where is Pastor Joseph?" The little girl ran in from the back of the house, breathless. "I don't know, Mama Rose. I thought he came back last night." Rose's knees weakened. She grabbed Muna's hand and whispered, "He went after them. He went to find Raphael." Before they could say another word, a horn sounded in the distance, deep and sharp, echoing through the village. Then came voices, angry voices, and the marching of feet. Rose turned toward the road and froze. Dozens of men were approaching, armed with sticks and ropes. At their front, the king. His face was grim, his red robe glowing in the early light. Behind them, 2 guards dragged Joseph, beaten, tied, his clothes torn. "Joseph!" Rose screamed, running toward him, but a guard pushed her back roughly. He fell to his knees, blood running down his face, yet his eyes were calm. The king pointed his staff toward him. "You were warned," he said coldly. 3 days. You chose death instead." Joseph raised his head slowly. "If death will make your eyes see truth," he said softly, "then so be it." The king waved his hand. "Take them." The guards seized Rose and Akpamu. They tied their hands and forced them to walk behind Joseph as the crowd chanted, "Bury them! Bury them alive!" Muna followed from a distance, crying silently. They marched through the forest path until they reached a wide clearing, the same place Joseph had seen the men the night before. A pit had already been dug, deep, fresh, waiting. The king turned to the crowd. "The man who brought a strange god into Onitsha will sleep beneath this soil. His blood will silence his gospel forever." Rose screamed, struggling against the ropes. "Please, he's done nothing wrong. He only prayed for peace." But the guards didn't listen. They pushed Joseph to the edge of the pit. He looked down, then lifted his face toward the sky. "Father, if this is your will, let your name be glorified, even in death." One guard stepped forward and kicked him hard into the pit. Rose screamed until her voice broke. Akpamu clung to her mother, shaking and crying. The king raised his staff again. "Cover it," he ordered. The guards began to shovel the earth in. Each sound of falling soil hit Rose's heart like a drum of grief. "Stop," she cried. "Please, stop!" But no one listened. Within moments, Joseph was gone from sight, buried beneath the soil, his prayers now silent. The king turned to Rose. "You and your children may leave Onitsha now. If you ever return, you will join him beneath this ground." Rose collapsed to the floor, her face buried in her hands. The guards released her and walked away, their shadows fading into the morning light. Muna rushed forward and fell beside her. "Don't cry, Mama Rose," she whispered. "God is not finished yet."
Rose didn't answer. She stared at the mound of fresh earth before her, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "Then, Lord, show them you're still God." The wind blew softly across the clearing, lifting the dust into the air. And for a moment, Rose thought she saw the soil move. Just a little, like something alive beneath it. Rose's sob was swallowed by the early wind. She sat stunned at the edge of the fresh mound, Akpamu clinging to her like a child who could not yet understand the depth of what had happened. Muna crouched beside them, her small hands pressed over a wooden cross. Around them, the village moved away in uneasy silence. Men who had shouted for blood now averted their eyes. Children peered from behind shutters. The world felt thin, as if the air itself might tear. For a long while, nothing happened. Then slowly, the earth began to breathe. It started as a tremor underfoot, faint, like the beat of a far-off drum. Dust rose in a whisper. The men with shovels froze, torches guttered, and a hush fell that was not human-made. Rose leaned forward, certain she had imagined the movement, when the dry soil at the center of the pit
shifted again, more deliberate this time, as though something beneath was pushing up against the grave. Before anyone could move, a light bloomed out of that trembling earth. Not the harsh glare of a torch, but a pure, steady flame, gold at its heart, white at its edge, that rose and formed a circle between the mound and the grieving women. It wasn't wind that fed it, it seemed to pour itself from the ground. The heat that reached them was gentle, like sunlight through a window, and yet every face turned away instinctively, as if the light exposed something deeper than skin. The ring grew, rising knee-high, then waist-high, then taller than any man. It encircled Rose, Akpamu, and Muna without touching them. The flames made no crackle. Instead, there was a low sound, a tone that pressed into the chest and steadied the heartbeat. Animals fled. Men dropped their tools, stumbling backward. Torches died as the ring swallowed their light, leaving only the steady, impossible brightness. Someone tried to step forward. A guard reached for Rose as if to pull her away, but when his boot crossed the glow, his limbs went rigid, paralysis washing through him like cold water. He fell to his knees and pressed his hands to his face, weeping, not from pain but from terror. The others turned and ran. The king himself, who had come to watch that morning's punishment, made a stifled sound and backed away, cloak trailing in the dust. The hush deepened into a silence so complete it felt like the village was holding its last shallow breath. Rose could only watch, chest heaving. Akpamu's small face was lifted, eyes wide in a way that made her mother's heart both break and burn with a stubborn hope. Muna's lips moved, and Rose realized the child was praying, not with words that Rose recognized, but with a steadiness that seemed to match the ring's rhythm. From inside the mound, something answered, not with sound first, but with a movement. The soil at the center rose just enough to show the tip of a hand. It was pale from dirt, fingers clenched as if refusing to let go. A single fingernail caught the new light and flashed. Then the earth settled. No thunder struck, no heavenly trumpet blared. Instead, the ring of fire hummed, and then began almost imperceptibly to shrink, not collapsing, but folding upward like a flower closing at dusk, until it sank into the soil and the light faded as if it had never been. Where the ring had been, the dust lay still. The fresh mound bore only a faint scorch that smelled faintly of myrrh. The men who had fled did not return. The king and his elders hurried away as if their own shadows had told them to run, but the villagers, the ones who had watched with fear, now watched with something else, a trembling that looked very much like wonder. Mothers clutched their children. The markets fell silent. Word would not stay here. It would ripple to the next town and then the next. Rose rose slowly, feeling the earth under her knees, and pressed both hands to the place where Joseph's fingers had shown. Her prayer this time was not only for rescue. It was a plea of faith
that whatever had touched the ground had not only protected them, but had begun to answer. Muna stepped forward, small and steady. She looked at Rose and then at the quiet pit, and said, as if telling a truth that had been inside her all along, "He's not finished." They walked away together, not yet sure where they would go, but certain now that something had broken the silence of Onitsha. The miracle had been witnessed, and wherever miracles are seen, questions follow. Beneath the mound, in the dark and the cold, hands moved slowly, not yet free, but alive. Not yet speaking, but waiting. Outside the village, the news began to run like wildfire, and by dusk, people were already whispering a name into the wind: Joseph. Morning crept slowly into Onitsha, painting the village in a pale, uneasy light. The air still carried the faint scent of smoke and myrrh from the night before. Word of what had happened at the grave had already spread. People spoke in hushed tones, afraid to say the name Joseph too loudly, as though it had become sacred overnight. But miles away, in a neighboring village called Inulu, a young boy stirred from unconsciousness beneath the wide branches of an old tree. His wrists were raw, the rope around them now loose, his clothes torn, his face bruised but alive. It was Raphael. He blinked, trying to piece together what had happened, the masked men, the shouting, the pain. And then, faintly, he heard a voice nearby, praying softly. An older man knelt beside him, one hand resting gently on his shoulder. That man was Pastor Nathan, a missionary who had once served in Onitsha years ago before being driven out by the same king who now ruled in fear. Nathan had been on his way to visit a sick member in Inulu when he found Raphael beaten and left for dead under the tree. He'd carried the boy to a small mission house, cleaned his wounds, and stayed awake all night beside him. And when Raphael finally opened his eyes, Nathan knew exactly who he was. By the next morning, Nathan set out with Raphael to find Rose and the children. They met halfway on the road, Rose walking weakly, holding Akpamu's hand, Muna following close behind. When she saw her son alive, she didn't run, she didn't scream, she just stood frozen, her eyes filling before her body caught up to the miracle, and she fell to her knees, holding him like a mother who had crossed from death to life. Pastor Nathan stood quietly beside them, watching the family cling together. When Rose finally looked up, her eyes met his, and for a moment she couldn't speak.
Nathan had heard the rumors that Joseph had been buried alive, but when he heard Rose describe the light that had encircled them, the ring of fire that appeared from nowhere, he didn't doubt her. He simply nodded, his jaw tightening with the weight of understanding. "I've seen this before," he murmured under his breath, almost to himself. "When a man's mission isn't finished, heaven doesn't close the book." That evening, Nathan offered them shelter in his mission home. He gave Rose dry clothes and warm food for the children, but she couldn't eat. She sat by the window long after night fell, staring into the forest that separated them from Onitsha. Her heart refused to rest. Nathan watched her quietly. He knew that kind of silence, the kind that comes when grief hasn't settled because faith won't let it. When she finally spoke, her voice was low but steady. "We're going back," she said. Nathan didn't argue. He only asked, "When?" "Tomorrow morning. I can't leave him there." He nodded once. "Then we go together." The next dawn, Nathan contacted a local army outpost near Akka, men who had once worked with him during previous missionary projects. When he told them about the situation, about how a pastor had been buried alive by order of a traditional ruler, disbelief turned to fury. By noon, a small convoy was ready. 2 trucks, a jeep, and a handful of armed officers willing to accompany them back into the heart of Onitsha. As they drove, the forest seemed different, quieter, yet heavy.
The same road that once brought fear now carried purpose. Rose sat in the back of the truck, holding Raphael's hand tightly. Akpamu slept against her shoulder. Muna, still quiet, stared out the window, whispering prayers only she could hear. Pastor Nathan sat in the front seat, Bible open on his lap, his eyes fixed on the horizon. By the time they reached the village gate, the sound of the engines had already drawn a crowd. People stepped back, murmuring, some crossing themselves in fear, others watching in awe. The king's men stood motionless at the entrance, unsure whether to flee or bow. Then, as Rose stepped down from the truck, the same strange stillness from the night before returned, the kind that makes the air feel alive. Every face turned toward the church at the center of the village. The wooden doors, once sealed and forgotten, stood wide open. A single voice echoed from within, deep, firm, and alive. Rose froze. Her breath caught. The crowd parted as if led by an unseen hand. She moved forward, her steps trembling, her heart racing. And there, standing on the church steps, covered in dust and scars, but very much alive, was Joseph. His hands were raised, his voice carried with a strength that wasn't human. Every word he spoke seemed to bend the air around him. The man they had buried was now preaching to the same people who had condemned him. Behind her, Pastor Nathan stopped walking. Even the soldiers lowered their weapons. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if heaven had decided to return what death had tried to keep. For a long moment, no one moved. It was as if the air itself had frozen around the figure standing at the church steps. The man before them, the pastor they had buried, looked nothing like the man who had once arrived trembling at their village gates. Joseph's skin was pale from days without light, his clothes torn, his eyes hollow. But behind that frail frame burned something no human could manufacture, a fire that belonged only to heaven. He lifted his face toward the sky, hands still raised, and the sound that left his mouth was not a man waking from death, but of a spirit reborn. The villagers stood in silence. Some wept without understanding why. Others fell to their knees as if something unseen had pressed them down. And somewhere in the back of the crowd, the king watched, the same man who had ordered this death. Joseph's voice carried across the square. He wasn't shouting, yet every syllable echoed with force. His first words were not of anger, not of vengeance. They were words of mercy. Words that reached the ears of those who had laughed at him, mocked his God, and lifted stones against his family. He said only this: even in the grave, God was still there. And with that, a sound broke through the air, a cry, raw and unfiltered. It came from the back of the crowd, from one of the guards who had helped cover Joseph's grave with sand. He fell forward, weeping, confessing everything. Then another dropped beside him, then another.
In moments, the entire square was filled with the sound of repentance, heavy, unrestrained, echoing through the morning air. Rose stood at the edge of the crowd, tears streaming silently. Raphael and Akpamu held each other. Muna pressed her palms together, eyes closed, her small frame trembling as she whispered thank yous under her breath. Pastor Nathan remained still, his gaze locked on Joseph, a faint smile pulling at the corners of his mouth, the kind that only comes when faith finally sees what it's been waiting for. Then, slowly, the king began to move.
The crowd parted instinctively as he walked toward the church, his robe dragging against the dirt. He stopped at the base of the steps, looking up at Joseph, and for the first time, his proud shoulders bent. He reached up and removed his crown, the same crown that had condemned an innocent man. And then, in front of his people, he knelt. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if waiting for something sacred to unfold. Joseph stepped down the last step and placed a trembling hand on the king's head. His fingers, still caked with dirt from the grave, rested on the same man who had once sentenced him to death. He prayed. And as he did, the sound of voices filled the square, hundreds of them, praying, confessing, crying out to the God of the man they had buried. By afternoon, the church that had stood empty for years was overflowing. People brought idols, charms, and shrines, laying them at the altar. The statue that once stood bleeding at the village entrance was shattered, its fragments carried away like dust in the wind. That night, the fire that burned in Onitsha was not of destruction. It was of revival. A light that spread from hut to hut, from family to family, until even the sky seemed to glow with it. Pastor Joseph preached until his voice broke. Rose stood beside him, her eyes full of quiet awe. And when he finally looked out over the crowd, he didn't see enemies anymore. He saw a people reborn. On the front row, the king sat with his head bowed, tears tracing down his face. He whispered a single sentence that every villager would remember for generations. We buried a man, but God raised a nation. As the final prayer echoed through the night, the story of Onitsha was no longer one of fear. It was a story of light. And from that day forward, no one could pass through that land without hearing about the pastor who was buried alive and the God who refused to let him stay there.
From darkness to dawn, from death to life. What happened in that small village will forever be remembered, not just as a story of tragedy, but as a testimony of faith that refused to give up. Joseph's resurrection didn't just awaken one man from the dead, it awakened a generation from unbelief. The same people who once mocked, who once doubted, now fill the village square every morning, lifting their voices in worship. Even the king, the man who had ordered silence over Pastor Nathan's prayers, now kneels in that same courtyard, eyes closed, hands trembling, as he prays with the people he once silenced. And Pastor Joseph, the man who had been buried in the ground for 3 days, now walks through the same streets with a quiet smile. The same children who once feared the grave now run to touch his hands. His story, his miracle, has become a living sermon. If there's one thing this story reminds us, it's that when faith meets obedience, heaven moves. And sometimes, God waits until every human strength has failed so that when the miracle happens, no man can take the glory. In the end, this wasn't just about Joseph. It wasn't even about Pastor Nathan. It was about a God who still writes stories through people. A God who still shows up, right when we think it's too late. Before we end this chapter, tell us, where are you watching from right now? And what part of this story touched your heart the most? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because here we tell real stories of faith,
of hope and of miracles that remind the world that light still wins.